the beginning argument, this is the cosmological argument, and I'll start smiling a lot because these are just so cool. I don't know how many of you have seen some of the Webb and Hubble telescope pictures, but this is, let me see what, I better follow my notes once in a while. See what this galaxy actually is. This is a galaxy named M101, and it is very similar to what scientists believe the Milky Way looks like. And so it gives us kind of a view of what our galaxy most likely looks like. It's just beautiful. You look at it and it's like, how can you possibly imagine that it came about by accident? I think astronomy is, well, it's just really cool. It's very interesting to see the science. And I'm a scientist by nature, as you guys know. So seeing these amazing pictures and then watching all the scientists try to figure out how to explain it is a lot of fun for me. So the cosmological argument. Let me, there are 5 major theories on how everything came into being. The first is the Big Bang. I'm sure you guys have heard of this, and I'll use a little object lesson for this. So the Big Bang is this idea that everything in the universe came from something about like that. That's the whole point. It's not small enough, it should be smaller than this, but from some singularity that's so small you couldn't see it, everything came from this, and then kaboom, everything came into being. That's effectively what the Big Bang theory is. The eternal universe is kind of like my teeter-totter here, and this was the most common, I can't get it to balance again, but this was the most common view of the universe in medieval times and before, in the ancient world, that the universe is eternal. And it's balanced in such a way that it never changes. Doesn't matter what we scurry around, we live, we die, but the universe itself never changes. That's the eternal, balanced universe concept. Another is what they call the cyclic universe, and I'll use my balloon. You guys, it's this idea that the universe is ever expanding, contracting. I'll see if I can do this. So you're going up, and then the next time it's going to go back down to the same singularity, and then it cycles back and forth. There's some problems with that theory. Then there's the redefined time theory. I'll use an hourglass to kind of represent it. And there's variations on this, and I'll talk about it in a moment. But it's this idea that time's not real, that it's only our perception, or that it can be redefined in some way. Basically like turning over the hourglass periodically. That's the reason the universe restarts. Stephen Hawking is most famous for coming up with this concept. Of course, he decided he didn't like it and refuted it later, but that's another conversation. And then the third is the so-called multiverse model, which is the one we hear about a lot. This is this infinite possibilities argument, and they usually use, I can't believe scientists divulge this, but they say it's a bubbling brew or a pot of virtual particles and universes just pop into existence. And the scientists actually used the little bubbling pot model. Yeah, that's what they use, and I'm like, okay, a little too.
Where the primordial soup came in.
But well, that's even the next step, which is just as stupid as that one, I think. But so let's look at our universe possibilities. I'm an engineer, so we always use the black box model. So I'll put all the models into our box. So we have the Big Bang, we have the balanced universe, we have the cyclic expanding contracting universe, we have I'm screwing around with the time in some way universe, and then the one that's outside of the universe would be the multiverse generator. All the rest of them have to happen inside the universe itself, right? The Big Bang has to have taken place inside the universe because everything in the universe came from it. The balanced universe says everything's always been the same for eternity past. That model's inside the universe. expanding, contracting, everything's still contained inside the universe. Then obviously the time warp. The multiverse is the only one that gets you kind of outside of the box. And that's one of those things we have to kind of look at. So, okay, so we'll talk about the Big Bang in a few minutes. And it's the most widely held perspective. And I think you guys will see the reason for that in a second. But let's just talk about the time adjusting or time warp theory that Stephen Hawking came up. And this is all really smart people coming up with a reason why there's no God. And they're really smart. They're very imaginative. So Stephen Hawking's idea was that you could that all time essentially is not real. It is this idea that we have this construct in our mind that we perceive time, but we actually don't experience time. And then about 5 years later, 5 years later, Hawkins came back and said, "This is a stupid idea." But it's still out there. And actually, there's a Japanese physicist. I was just reading an article, not just maybe 2 weeks ago. He believes in string theories, and he had this idea that it's just a construct. And it's like, how do you know?
It's just reading the article in Japanese, because that's what I'd expect from you.
Well, no, I can't read in Japanese, but luckily he speaks English and writes in English. But it's this idea is like, if you can imagine that the universe is really just conceptual, some of these guys go as far as saying that we don't exist at all. That they have I can't think what the kind of brain they call it. They have a term. It starts with a B. This idea that there's one brain and we're all just part of the brain. It's like, that's like sci-fi. Okay? Yeah, it's all sci-fi stuff, right? And another might be that but they're scientists, right? And scientists believe in the scientific method, and they're always telling us that it is not reasonable to believe in God because you cannot believe in something you cannot see. But they believe in things like the time warp theory that you can't see, you can't test. It's only imagined, actually, I can't think of what this guy's name is, but he had this idea that he had a way to test and prove that time was not really real. And he was going to use a particle accelerator. I don't know if anybody knows particle accelerating stuff. I did a little bit of that when I was in graduate school, so I got interested. So I decided, let's see what he has to say about this. He said, yes, you could prove that time wasn't real if we had a particle accelerator the size of the known universe. And I'm like, what? I mean, I was like, how can you take serious science, which is, I mean, if you can imagine building something the size of the known universe, and that's what's necessary, it means you're
Means you be God.
Well, yeah, you're kind of making yourself God, and one, you're drinking a punch that maybe you should drink less of. That's the only thing I can think of. It's like, so I think we can rule that one out as plausible. Now, it could be, but it's not very plausible. So let's look at the next one. The next one, I think, is the balanced universe concept, right? This is, like I said, it was the most commonly held view in the ancient world. And well, frankly, science doesn't support it because we have the second law of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics says basically everything moves toward chaos, effectively, right, or disorder. So you get less and less useful energy as time moves forward. That's what our science tells us. You can't use science to prove this theory because if your theory is right, then all of our science is wrong. So it's one of these things where observable science says second law of thermodynamics is observed, tested. It's something that we can say is verifiable. Yet, if you're going to have this theory, you have to throw that out and say, I guess on a big scale it doesn't work. And like I said, that's where it crosses a line into neither logical, reasonable, or scientific. It becomes a belief, and obviously beliefs are what they are. So we'll say that one's less plausible. So that leaves us with the expanding and contracting universe. And this one's been around for a while. In fact, it was pretty predominant when I was a kid, this idea that the universe would expand to a certain state and then it would slowly shrink back down to the same singularity, and it would just go through this cycle over and over again. Well, but science has moved forward since the 80s when I was a kid, and we now know that the expansion rate of the universe is accelerating and not slowing down. And, well, that kind of blows that theory completely away, right? Because for this theory to be true, the acceleration rate has to be slowing down. From the point of the singularity, it would accelerate out and slowly slow down until it reached equilibrium, and then it would come back. So the fact that we can observe the universe, especially with these powerful telescopes, and see that the expansion rate of the universe is actually accelerating, we can say bye-bye to the cyclic model of the universe. So that leaves us with two: the Big Bang and this multiverse generator concept, which is outside the universe. Does anybody know where the multiverse idea came from? Oh, you guys are going to laugh.
Stanley. Oh, I was going to say
The multiverse actually was first coined in 1895 by a guy by the name of William Jones. And what he meant by multiverse was multiple possibilities. He wrote a book, and this idea was that every choice we make in life could lead us down a different path with different end results. That was his idea. And he used the term multiverse as multiple versions of ourselves, not multiple dimensions. In 1963, Marvel Comics picked up on that term and wrote Avengers number 185, which was the birth of the multiverse concept, where you had different dimensions and different universes, and they're basically different copies of us in these infinite number of universes. It's comic book. Okay, so speed forward to the 2000s, and guess what science does? We look to comic books to come up with our new theory, because the problem was we're stuck with the Big Bang, and if you have a Big Bang, you have a issue if you're a naturalist. So they came up with this idea, and what's funny is they've run all different kinds of variations on this concept, and what I think is interesting is they've gone so far as to define 26 different dimensions of existence. This is the latest one. I can't remember what the guy's name was, but it's like, I don't know how he came up with 26. I can only perceive, 4 myself. You got 3 spatial and 1 time. Why 26? I don't get it, but I guess it's this idea that nobody can refute him because he has all these, and he doesn't have a description for it, but it's this idea that there's multiple layers of existence that we just can't perceive. So how do you perceive it? It's got to be the question you got to ask the guy. It's like, if you can't perceive it, then why are you talking about it? It's not science. It's science fiction, right? and so that puts us in the awkward position for the scientists. And I want you to listen to Lawrence Krauss. Lawrence Krauss he's out of Arizona State University. He's a really outspoken atheist. He was kind of the second tier of the new atheists. And he wrote a book, and this is a clip from Stephen Colbert's show. Just listen. It's glorious. Well, keep praying, keep doing, and keep putting rocks in the shoes. Before we start talking about Lawrence Krauss, this is a book on quantum mechanics. So I can tell you fairly definitively what he's talking about. Quantum mechanics is not in quantum mechanics. The quantum mechanics does not predict, but he uses that, and you'll see this often, especially with the skeptics that are trying to attack Christianity. They'll throw out stuff like, oh, this is what it is, and they'll try to overwhelm you with either science or with philosophy or whatever your weakness is in a way that they know you can't refute because you don't know this.
Yeah.
Okay,
You don't
but
know what quantum mechanics
don't know what
is.
quantum mechanics. I mean,
And it's just like, oh, it's quantum mechanics. It explains it. It's
yeah. I
like,
mean, how many people know what a Laplace transform is? You probably do, but it's it's just science. It may be sophisticated science, but there are a lot of people that know this, and none of them know that. Whatever whatever sci-fi concept he was spouting. But people,
None of what he said to me made sense. I mean, it was just like a bunch of mumbo jumbo. He's just grasping at straws to try to explain what he thinks he knows.
I think you see this a lot in the skeptics of anything. Actually, if I'm trying to shut down your idea because I don't like it, I'm going to overwhelm you with stuff. Most of it might be meaningless stuff. We see this in every frame of or walk of life, where if I don't have a good argument, I'm going to give you like a whole bunch of stuff. None of it is relevant. But the volume, I'm going to try to use the cumulative case approach on you without having any evidence. And it's really common. We see it in Christian circles all the time. You see in a debate, they'll list off 50 scriptures. You go look at those scriptures and it's like, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Yeah.
They list them out for the weight because you can't check them that quick. But if you had to read all of them, you'd go, I don't have to have a doctorate degree to understand that you just blew a bunch of hot air. And unfortunately, it's a common human approach, and Krauss is essentially using it. And I like, this is out of his book, and it says, physics has changed what we mean by nothing. It's empty space and a boiling, bubbling brew of virtual particles popping in and out of existence. If you wait long enough, that kind of nothing will always produce particles. Can you see a problem with his premise?
It's contrary to first law of thermodynamics, which is law of conservation.
That's true. It's even worse, though.
You cannot create energy. It's state as it is, transformed to different.
How would you describe the universe? Space, matter, and time, right? That's the universe. Look at what Krauss actually did in the explanation. Empty space, virtual matter, and time.
Wow.
So really what he said, that if you have space, time, and matter, you can make space, time, and matter. Duh. It's this idea that he had all these fancy words, but he's really saying if space exists, which means the universe already exists, if particles exist, which means matter already exists, and if you wait long enough, which means time has to exist, well, yeah, we believe that too. If you have space, time, and matter, you can have space, time, and matter. But they're blind because they're looking for an argument that proves to the world that God doesn't exist. And you actually should ask questions. Why do they care? If God really does not exist and I'm this ultra smart person, why would I care if you believe in God? Because he doesn't exist.
The ultimate sin from the fall is really self-justification. Right? I mean, it's, God's way or my way. We tend to want to choose our way until we start to see God's ways better. But the two ways in which you can remain in your way are you to either, talk away God is one of the little forks. The other fork is I admit God exists, but I'm doing such a good job of working towards, being faithful to my religiosity. I'm such a good man that I'm good now, so now I can look down on other people. But those are both, self-justification.
Oh, definitely. That's spot on. And I think that's the reason the atheists work so hard to disprove God, because they want the self-justification. They want more people to come with them, right? Because that gives them a cumulative case in their own mind that they must be right. If they can convince a bunch of people that they're right, and then there might be more right than they think in their own minds. I think when people try to justify things that are not relevant to their existence, there's always an agenda. And the agenda is usually they don't really believe it, and they're looking for someone else to support their idea in a way that helps them to keep their belief going. But yeah, Krauss's idea is like, I think the multiverse generator has to be no. And there's a couple other reasons for that. If there was a multiverse generator, it would have to be highly sophisticated. It have to be detailed in its design to be able to generate things. It actually doesn't get you past the creator perspective, because what created it, and for it to be so sophisticated, it has to be a very intelligent creator. You end up right back to God, honestly, because you have to get back to the first cause. which is the reason you're stuck with the Big Bang. And in fact, most physicists get there. This is Stephen Hawking and Roger Penrose. They're both Nobel laureate physicists, and they say almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself came into a beginning at the Big Bang. And they're saying basically all the other alternatives just kind of fall apart. And Alex Vintgen says this, that the proof now is in place in cosmologists can no longer hide behind the plausibility or possibility of a past eternal universe. There is now no escape. They have to face the problem of the cosmic beginning. And these are all atheists. What they're saying is all these different cosmological arguments that we went through are not supported by science. They're supported by imagination. And so they came back, okay, they believe in the Big Bang. And the question is, okay, if we're stuck to the Big Bang, what is the obvious question we have to ask? Well, if you have a Big Bang, then you pretty much need a Big Banger, right? There has to be something that was powerful to make everything out of nothing, is spaceless, timeless, and that starts looking a lot like the Christian God as you go through. So that's pretty high level, but you can see that the beginning argument, although it is not definitive proof for God, it's pretty tough you can't disprove God looking at the beginnings argument. The most plausible, there has to be that first cause. It's outside of the universe, and however you define it, it looks more and more like God, right? But again, that's just one argument.
It is accepted now in science that there was a beginning. Before, there's none.
No,
now they know. They can test it. There's some evidence that there was a beginning.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about when we start looking at the teleological, we start looking at the telescopes. The evidence that we see of the beginning of the universe, well, you think about it, okay. Is anybody taking astronomy at all? Maybe it's just me, but you look at a star out there, it's a finite size, or even if they're really big, they're only a certain size. And they're burning, right? Our sun takes a hydrogen and go through a fusion reaction, produces helium, right? It only has so much. So at a certain time, it's going to run out. And we know that. They talk about supernovas and all these different processes that astronomy has proven that we've been able to observe, that stars run out of fuel. Well, then what? Why do we still have stars if the universe is billions and billions of years old? They're starting to come up with some theories for that one.
Birthing planet.
Planets. Now they have a birthing star regions in the universe. But you got to come up with excuses. So the science fails. So now I have to come up with science fiction to come up with an explanation of why my explanation doesn't work. And then that's what usually happens. So you look at the science, and the science is actually pretty clear. And then you're stuck with, well, if the science is clear, then my explanation doesn't really work very good for me. It means there's a beginning and there's an end. That's pretty strong support for the Bible. And now they have to come up with something else to try to get there.